Have you ever witnessed a rough diamond buried beneath layers of prejudice? In a place where intellect is revered, can skin color and background become invisible barriers, preventing a genius from shining? The story I am about to tell will take you to a silent battleground, where numbers become weapons and intellect is the arena. Join me as we follow the journey of a young man who dared to challenge the most brilliant minds with nothing but his passion and extraordinary perseverance. Worthington University, a towering symbol of knowledge and power, stood in the heart of America like an unyielding fortress. Its ancient stone walls, draped in ivy that had witnessed centuries of scholarly pursuits, exuded an aura of prestige and tradition. Each footstep echoing on the flagstone walkways seemed to whisper tales of intellectual giants who had walked these very paths. This was a place where renowned mathematicians were forged, minds that commanded the respect of the entire world. But at Worthington, talent alone was not the sole criterion for acceptance. Lineage, reputation, and sometimes, it seemed, the very fabric of one's being held even greater weight. And then, amidst this hallowed setting, an outsider arrived. Malik Johnson, a young black man hailing from the south side of Chicago, a neighborhood where the sounds of gunfire and the shadows of poverty overshadowed the fragile buds of hope. He stepped onto the Worthington campus holding a golden ticket, a full scholarship, earned through a mathematics essay so groundbreaking that the admissions committee had engaged in a heated debate that stretched through the entire night before finally reaching their decision. However, Worthington was far from a welcoming haven for Malik. From his very first moments on campus, he could sense the subtle chill of skepticism and doubt emanating from those around him, particularly from Professor Langford. A white scholar of the old guard, Langford was renowned for his staunch adherence to tradition and an unwavering belief in established academic hierarchies. During the introductory orientation for new students, Langford's gaze lingered on Malik, carrying an unmistakable air of scrutiny and thinly veiled disdain. "We do not simply hand out opportunities here, Johnson." Langford's voice cut through the initial excitement of the ceremony, each word delivered with a chilling formality. "We expect you to earn it. Prove that you belong." The weight of those words settled heavily on Malik's shoulders, a stark contrast to the hope that had filled him just moments before. The lecture halls and seminar rooms quickly transformed into an invisible battlefield for Malik. Challenging problem sets were distributed without comprehensive guidance, leaving him to navigate the complex terrain of advanced mathematics largely on his own. Academic discussions unfolded at lightning speed, conducted in a rarefied language of the elite that often left Malik struggling to keep up. He would sit in silence, diligently taking notes, attempting to decipher the intricate concepts being discussed. Yet, he couldn't escape the feeling of being an observer, an outsider looking in on a world that seemed determined to exclude him. He meticulously reviewed his notes after each class, spending hours in the hushed confines of the library, poring over textbooks and research papers, trying to bridge the gap between his foundational knowledge and the advanced level of discourse at Worthington. But the subtle condescension persisted. During group study sessions, he would often find himself excluded, the other students, mostly white, mostly from privileged backgrounds, forming their own tight-knit circles, their conversations peppered with inside jokes and shared academic histories that Malik couldn't penetrate. Even when he dared to raise his hand to ask a question, a wave of subtle mockery would ripple through the room. A barely perceptible sigh from a professor, a fleeting roll of the eyes from a classmate, a hushed chuckle in the back row, each small gesture served as a constant reminder of his perceived inadequacy, of the unspoken assumption that he didn't quite belong in this esteemed institution. He was a dissonant note in the otherwise harmonious symphony of intellectual privilege. Malik tried to ignore the negativity, focusing instead on the sheer beauty and logic of the mathematics itself. He had always found solace and inspiration in the elegant patterns and profound truths hidden within numbers. It was this deep-seated passion that had fueled his relentless pursuit of knowledge, that had driven him to excel in the challenging environment of South Side, and that had ultimately earned him his place at Worthington. But even his love for mathematics couldn't completely shield him from the constant barrage of subtle and not-so-subtle reminders that he was seen as an anomaly, an affirmative action case who had somehow slipped through the cracks. The weight of expectation, coupled with the constant feeling of being judged, began to take its toll. Sleepless nights were spent wrestling with complex equations, his mind racing, trying to prove not only to his professors and classmates but also to himself that he was worthy of the opportunity he had been given. He would often find himself staring out of his dorm room window, the glittering lights of the Chicago skyline a distant reminder of the world he had come from, a world where the challenges were different but no less real. He carried the weight of his community's hopes on his young shoulders, the unspoken pressure to succeed, to break through the barriers that had held back so many before him. Despite the isolation and the constant undercurrent of prejudice, Malik refused to be discouraged. He knew that he possessed a unique perspective, a way of seeing the world and understanding problems that his privileged peers might never grasp. He had learned to find patterns in the chaos of his neighborhood, to calculate probabilities in the face of adversity. This lived experience, he believed, gave him an edge, a different lens through which to view the intricate world of mathematics. He was determined to prove that brilliance knew no boundaries of race or background, and that his presence at Worthington was not a mistake, but a testament to the power of talent and perseverance. The initial excitement of being accepted into such a prestigious university was slowly being replaced by a steely resolve, a quiet determination to not only survive but to thrive in this challenging environment, to silence the doubts and prove his worth through the undeniable power of his intellect. The journey ahead would be arduous, but Malik was ready for the fight. He had faced tougher battles on the streets of Chicago, and he would face this one with the same unwavering spirit and the unshakable belief in his own potential. The initial weeks at Worthington bled into months, and for Malik, the sense of being an outsider only intensified, casting a long shadow over his academic pursuits. Time moved forward, marked by the relentless cycle of lectures, assignments, and exams. For Malik, each day felt like navigating a minefield of subtle exclusions and unspoken judgments. He continued to attend every class, his notebook filled with meticulously transcribed notes, but the feeling of being disconnected from his peers persisted. Group projects were a source of constant anxiety. When assignments required collaboration, Malik would often find himself the last one chosen, or sometimes not chosen at all. He would politely offer to join existing groups, but his offers were usually met with vague excuses or polite but firm rejections. The unspoken message was clear. He was not considered an equal, not someone whose contributions were truly valued. Even during informal study sessions in the library or the student lounge, Malik felt like an invisible presence. Conversations would often fall silent as he approached, only to resume with forced pleasantries or shift to topics he had no context for. He observed his classmates engaging in lively debates about mathematical concepts, effortlessly building upon each other's ideas, their shared understanding a stark contrast to his own solitary struggle. He yearned to participate, to offer his own insights, but the fear of being dismissed or ridiculed often held him back. The subtle condescension from some of the professors also continued to chip away at his confidence. While Professor Langford remained the most overtly skeptical, there were other instructors whose words or actions conveyed a similar lack of faith in Malik's abilities. A dismissive wave of the hand when he asked a question, a tone of surprise when he offered a correct answer, these small instances accumulated, reinforcing the feeling that he was constantly under scrutiny, constantly having to prove his worth in a way that his peers did not. This sense of isolation permeated every aspect of Malik's academic life. He applied to join several advanced research seminars, hoping to delve deeper into specific areas of mathematics that fascinated him. Each application was met with a polite but standard rejection, often citing limited spaces or a preference for students with more established academic records within Worthington. The unspoken truth, Malik suspected, was that his background, his lack of connections within the university, played a significant role in these decisions. He felt like he was constantly hitting a wall, an invisible barrier erected by the ingrained biases of the institution. The midterm exam in Professor Langford's advanced calculus course presented Malik with an opportunity to showcase his unique approach to problem solving, but the outcome was far from what he had hoped for. One of the questions on the exam involved a complex nonlinear equation that had stumped many of the students. While others struggled to apply standard techniques, Malik saw a different path. Drawing upon his independent studies, he recognized the underlying patterns and realized that the problem could be elegantly simplified using a fractal geometry model. Fractals, with their self-similar patterns repeating at different scales, offered a way to break down the complexity of the equation into manageable iterative steps. He meticulously worked through his solution, his pen flying across the paper, translating his intuitive understanding into a series of precise mathematical steps. He felt a surge of excitement as the solution unfolded, a sense of clarity and elegance that confirmed his approach. He submitted his exam with a quiet confidence, believing that he had not only solved the problem but had also offered a novel and insightful perspective. Days later, when the exams were returned, Malik's heart sank as he saw the grade, a C-. Scrawled beneath the solution was Professor Langford's curt feedback: too creative, to the point of inaccuracy. Malik stared at the grade, a wave of disbelief and then anger washing over him. He carefully reviewed his solution, comparing it to the standard methods discussed in class. He couldn't find any fundamental errors in his logic or calculations. His approach was different, unconventional perhaps, but it was mathematically sound. He approached Professor Langford during office hours, his exam paper clutched tightly in his hand. He respectfully explained his reasoning, carefully outlining the steps of his fractal-based solution. Langford listened with a dismissive air, his gaze fixed on some papers on his desk. When Malik finished, Langford simply shrugged. "Johnson," he said, his voice laced with condescension, "while I commend your originality, this is an advanced calculus course. We expect solutions that adhere to established methodologies. Your approach, while perhaps interesting in a theoretical sense, is not what we were looking for. Stick to the fundamentals." Malik left Langford's office feeling defeated and frustrated. It wasn't just the low grade. It was the dismissal of his intellectual curiosity, the blatant disregard for his unique way of thinking. He felt like he was being penalized for his creativity, for daring to step outside the rigid boundaries of traditional mathematics. The comment about his solution being interesting in a theoretical sense stung the most. It implied that his work was not practical, not rigorous enough for the standards of Worthington. The rejection of his fractal solution became a turning point for Malik, pushing him further into his own world of independent study and leading to an unexpected moment of understanding. He returned to his small, sparsely furnished dorm room, the graded exam paper crumpled in his hand. His eyes burned with unshed tears as he re-examined his solution, meticulously tracing the equations on the bare walls of his room with his finger. The faint light from his desk lamp cast long shadows, amplifying the feeling of isolation. He felt a profound sense of injustice, a deep-seated frustration at being judged not on the merit of his work but on the basis of his unconventional approach. It was then that Jalen, his roommate, walked in. Jalen, a quiet and observant young man studying literature, had witnessed Malik's struggles firsthand. He had seen the late nights spent studying, the quiet determination in Malik's eyes, and the subtle ways in which he was being marginalized by the university's academic elite. He saw the pain and frustration etched on Malik's face as he stared at the graded exam. Jalen sat down on his own bed, his gaze soft with empathy. "They're scared of you, Malik," he said quietly, his voice a low murmur in the dimly lit room. Malik looked up, surprised by the unexpected statement. "Scared? Why would they be scared?" he asked, his voice laced with bitterness. "Not because you're wrong," Jalen explained, his eyes meeting Malik's, "but because you're right, in a way they don't understand. Your way of thinking challenges their assumptions, their established order. They're comfortable with the familiar, with the methods they've always used. Your creativity threatens that." Jalen's words struck a chord with Malik. He had never considered the possibility that his professors might feel threatened by his unconventional thinking. He had always assumed that the pursuit of knowledge was an open and welcoming endeavor, but he was beginning to realize that the reality was far more complex. From that night on, Malik's approach shifted. He didn't try to conform to the expectations of Worthington. Instead, he immersed himself even deeper into his own independent studies. He devoured old textbooks, watched online lectures from MIT and Stanford, and continued to explore the intricacies of fractal geometry and its applications to various fields of mathematics. He would spend hours in the university's underutilized mathematics library, discovering forgotten theorems and exploring the work of mathematicians who had dared to think outside the box. He started proving fundamental theorems using his own unique methods, developing a deeper and more intuitive understanding of the underlying principles. He didn't respond to the prejudice with anger or resentment. Instead, he channeled his frustration into a relentless pursuit of knowledge, working with a quiet intensity, like a scientist meticulously preparing for a groundbreaking experiment. He was no longer seeking validation from his professors or his peers. His focus had shifted inward, driven by an intrinsic desire to understand the beauty and power of mathematics on his own terms. He was silently building a foundation of knowledge and insight that would eventually surprise everyone, a testament to his resilience and unwavering dedication to his passion. The invisible battle continued, but now, Malik was fighting on his own terms, armed with his unique perspective and an unyielding determination to prove his intellectual worth. The annual Future of Intellect conference arrived, an event that promised to be a pivotal moment, though no one, least of all Malik, could have predicted the role he would play. The Future of Intellect conference was the highlight of the academic year at Worthington. Renowned scholars from across the globe descended upon the campus, eager to witness the groundbreaking research being conducted by the university's brightest minds. The main auditorium buzzed with anticipation as faculty members, graduate students, and even a few distinguished alumni filled the seats. The program was meticulously curated, featuring presentations from the most promising doctoral candidates and established researchers. Malik had no expectation of attending, let alone presenting at such a prestigious event. He had always viewed it as an exclusive gathering for the academic elite, a world far removed from his own quiet struggles in the shadows of Worthington. However, fate, or perhaps a simple administrative error, had other plans. In the days leading up to the conference, a revised program was circulated. To everyone's astonishment, including Malik's, his name appeared on the list of presenters. Under the unassuming title Novel Applications of Fractal Geometry in Financial Modeling was the name Malik Johnson. The news spread through the mathematics department like wildfire. Whispers of confusion and disbelief rippled through the student body and even among some of the faculty. How had Malik Johnson, the quiet, often overlooked student from Southside, managed to secure a spot on the program? Speculation ran rampant, with some attributing it to a clerical error, others to a misguided attempt at inclusivity. Clarification: when Malik's name was called, a hush fell over the auditorium. He walked onto the stage, his heart pounding in his chest, the weight of every doubt and every dismissive glance he had endured pressing down on him. Professor Langford sat in the front row, his arms crossed, a skeptical smirk playing on his lips. Several students in the audience exchanged knowing glances, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled derision. One student leaned over to another and whispered, loud enough for Malik to hear, "Another presentation courtesy of the scholarship quota." Malik adjusted the microphone, his hands slightly trembling. He looked out at the sea of faces, a mix of anticipation, curiosity, and outright skepticism staring back at him. He took a deep breath and began. He didn't start with complex equations or abstract theories. Instead, his first slide displayed a single striking image, a vibrant, three-dimensional fractal model that pulsed with intricate patterns. "Good morning," Malik began, his voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil within him. "My research explores the application of fractal geometry to the modeling of global financial systems." He paused, letting the image on the screen capture the audience's attention. Traditional financial models often rely on linear equations and assumptions of predictability. However, the reality of global finance is far more complex, characterized by nonlinear dynamics and unpredictable fluctuations. He advanced to the next slide, which displayed a series of complex differential equations. But instead of dwelling on the abstract mathematics, Malik immediately brought it to life with the next slide. The same fractal model, now overlaid with real-time data representing global financial flows. The numbers, colors, and movements on the screen began to weave a compelling narrative, a story told not in words, but in the elegant language of mathematics. Malik's presentation was unlike anything the audience had ever seen. He didn't simply present abstract formulas. He visualized them, transforming complex mathematical concepts into an engaging and intuitive experience. He explained how the self-similar patterns inherent in fractal geometry could capture the inherent volatility and interconnectedness of the global financial system in a way that traditional models could not. He showed how his model could identify potential risks and predict market fluctuations with a degree of accuracy that surprised even the most seasoned financial experts in the room. His voice, though not booming or theatrical, resonated with a quiet confidence and an undeniable passion for his subject. He spoke with clarity and precision, breaking down complex ideas into digestible concepts. As he progressed through his presentation, the initial skepticism in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of awe and fascination. Even Professor Langford's smirk slowly faded, his brow furrowed in concentration as he watched the intricate patterns unfold on the screen. Midway through his presentation, Malik paused, his gaze sweeping across the silent auditorium. "I was not born in libraries," he said, his voice gaining a newfound strength. "But I have seen mathematics in every corner of my impoverished neighborhood. I have seen statistics in the survival probabilities of a child growing up amidst violence. I learned calculus from watching my mother balance 3 jobs just to send me to school." A profound silence settled over the room. The air crackled with a newfound understanding. The eyes that had once held suspicion and disdain now reflected a mixture of surprise and dawning respect. Professor Langford leaned forward in his seat, his initial skepticism replaced by a look of intense concentration. He couldn't refute the work that was unfolding before him, the elegant equations and the compelling visualizations that presented a completely new way of understanding a complex global system. These were equations he himself had never conceived of, insights that challenged the very foundations of his own understanding. As Malik concluded his presentation, a stunned silence hung in the air for a moment, followed by an eruption of applause. The entire audience rose to their feet, their hands clapping in unison, a thunderous ovation that echoed through the auditorium. It was a spontaneous and heartfelt display of appreciation, the first standing ovation in the history of the Future of Intellect conference. In the aftermath of his groundbreaking presentation, Malik chose a path that spoke volumes about his character. After the applause subsided, the auditorium buzzed with excited chatter. Professors and students alike crowded around Malik, eager to congratulate him and ask questions about his research. Offers for collaborations and potential job opportunities began to surface. But Malik, despite the sudden attention and accolades, remained calm and composed. He answered questions thoughtfully, but he didn't bask in the limelight. As the crowd began to thin, Malik quietly gathered his belongings and started to walk off the stage. He didn't wait for the formal closing remarks or the presentation of awards. He had said what he needed to say, and he had proven what he needed to prove. His victory was not about seeking external validation. It was about the internal satisfaction of knowing he had stayed true to himself and his passion. But before he could disappear into the bustling hallway, a voice called out his name. "Johnson! Wait!" Malik turned around to see Professor Langford standing near the edge of the stage, his face etched with a mixture of surprise and something akin to humility. Langford walked towards Malik, his usual air of authority replaced by a hesitant respect. Your work," Langford began, his voice slightly unsteady. It made me realize that I may have been teaching incorrectly for the past 20 years. Malik met Langford's gaze, his eyes direct and unwavering. There was no hint of triumph or resentment in his expression, only a quiet understanding. "Professor," Malik replied, his voice calm and measured, "you weren't wrong. You just hadn't looked deeply enough at a student who didn't look like you." With those words, Malik turned and walked away, stepping out into the bright afternoon sunlight, his worn notebook filled with complex equations still clutched in his hand. He didn't need the applause or the accolades. His greatest victory wasn't a medal or a certificate. It was the dawning of understanding, the quiet shift in perspective in the eyes of those who had once dismissed him. Genius knows no skin color, and perseverance, when persistent enough, will command the world to listen in silence. If you found this story inspiring, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with others. And to make sure you don't miss more inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel today.